Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we have a set of stories about people who you would rather not meet. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. In the summer of '95, I was a 21-year-old female staying in the one-bedroom dorm in my college that was kept open for the summer. It was a women's college tucked away between two busy urban areas, and we always felt safe on campus. With the sort of energy that makes me feel tired just thinking of it these days, I would walk 1.5 miles to work, a split shift as a waitress, and walk back to the dorm and shower and then head out to meet friends at our local dive bar and drinks and mischief. My friends were always more about the mischief than I was, since I had a long-distance boyfriend who I was doing a decently good job of remaining faithful to. It was pretty common for a couple of people to peel off from the group and make their way to whatever hookup they were interested in for the night, but we were all being a little more careful right around the time of this story. I looked for confirmation but couldn't find any news stories, and I know for a fact though that there was a serial rapist roaming around the area where we lived and worked and played. No one had a very good description, and people were kind of on edge, making sure no one walked home by themselves at night. 2 a.m. was the last call when you're a certain type of friendly girl, specifically taken, a challenge. The bartenders all fall over themselves to lock you in with them and give you one last drink before you go home. It's not ego, it's just how it was. The night in question, it was just my best friend and I hanging out, drinking hideous things like SoCo and OJ and Captain Morgan's and Diet Coke. Sweet drinks, easy to sip, and easier to chug until your good sense filters away. My friend Bridget made me promise to let the bartender take her home. She was wandering off with her latest conquest, but I guess still coherent enough to remember that friends didn't make friends walk home at 2:30 a.m. by themselves. I said, yeah, sure, of course I'd get a ride, mentally crossing my fingers. I wasn't going to pay back the free drinks, and I certainly wasn't going to let the nasty bartenders get me alone in a car. She walked away, I had my last drink and let myself out of the bar, waving and saying how I was just fine. It was about 25 minutes to walk. I did it all the time. It was mostly main streets, only a few side roads before turning into the college campus. That was a little dicey there. Now, of course, anyone walking home at night by themselves regularly is going to see a creepy character or two, but I had a secret weapon starting in simplicity itself. Most creepy guys weren't used to being seen, being greeted and smiled at. Trust me, I'm not justifying their creepiness, just saying that it was my instinctive self-protective gambit. 2:30 a.m. I wasn't even thinking about the weirdo from the news. I wish I could remember what I was thinking, and was probably debating whether to break up with my boyfriend, maybe whether cereal would make me sick on top of drinks, or even just singing in my head. All I know is that it was about 4 blocks from campus. I had turned onto the darker side streets and was ready to be almost home. That's when I saw a guy about half a block away walking towards me. Tall, sort of solid looking, baseball cap, but something about him made me pretty sure he was even older than the grad students we'd sometimes joke around with. I wasn't really scared, any more than any other night. I just plastered a smile on my face and got ready to chirp out, "Hi there, what a great night, isn't it?" I only got out, "Hi." I was still smiling when he sort of paused. Thinking back, it all happened so fast, I don't have a good feel for the timing of the whole thing. I just know I said hello, he paused and sort of tilted his head and looked at me. I don't remember what he looked like other than the dark hair. He wasn't much in the way of ambient light, and the streetlights were pretty far apart around that area. He nodded slowly. I remember slowing down, thinking he was going to say something to me, and would have to react nicely. I was irritated, but I must have kept a smile on my face because he said pretty quietly in an extremely gravelly voice, "You should go home now. You're a nice girl, and nice girls shouldn't be out." I'll never forget the way he said that, the tone in his voice, and the precision of his word choice. I made a note to tell Bridget, Crap, I met another weirdo. I picked up the pace though, calling out, "Have a great night," as I rounded the bend and saw the entrance to campus ahead. I walked quicker than normal, not running but definitely upping my pace, and I crashed, slept hard and almost missed my alarm to make it to work the next day. I was no amateur and totally set my work before I left for the night. I was doing my side work at the restaurant before things picked up, when I saw one of my co-workers stop and stare at the TV set that blared away in the bar. It was drowned out at night when people crowded around 6 p.m, but it was loud and clear and the news was on. Turns out the night before, the rapist had broken into a house and attacked another woman. I'll spare you the details, they're pretty awful. I just wish the lady hadn't been having trouble sleeping. She kept staring at the digital alarm clock, playing games with the number, she said. If she kept her eyes open and saw the number flick, she'd fall asleep. Stupid games like that. I mean, she knew exactly what time someone walked into her room. Turns out it was about 10 minutes later and a street over from where I saw the guy and trusted my stupid trick to keep me safe. She didn't see his face, but she talked about how his voice sounded like someone who'd been screaming all night, all hoarse and guttural. I still shiver at my close escape, and I still smile at strangers and say hi, but I don't walk at night anymore. It might not be as scary as some of the paranormal stuff everyone's seen, but it turns out I probably saw the face of evil, and it was dark enough that I barely saw anything at all. They never caught the guy. I don't even remember how it ended, just that it seemed to trail off once the school year started again. I had just recently gotten my first job at a chain sandwich shop. It was located in this shopping mall outlet at the far end. There were quite a few businesses around it, including a restaurant down the way and a super Target on the other side of the mall at the far end of the parking lot. My parents were always super protective and taught me at a young age to be aware of my surroundings and protect myself, and rarely ever let me walk alone to begin with. On this particular day, I had left my phone at home because I wasn't allowed to have it at work and had a daily time limit on it anyway. Thanks, Mum. I ended up finishing up early, and my mum was still shopping at the Target, so told me to go ahead and walk over to meet her. I began walking towards the Target and had to wait for passing cars. One silver car stopped and let me walk across. I smiled and waved thank you, and the man inside the car did the same, and turned on the street going in the direction I was walking. I didn't think anything of it, as it was a relatively busy parking lot, and most of the shops are over on the other side by the Target. A minute or two goes by and I spot the same car now driving in the opposite direction towards me. I take a mental note, but think that I'm just overreacting. This is until he turns back round. At this point I'm cornered, and notice I'm now at a part of the mall that's a little less crowded with more of an empty parking lot. I get this uneasy feeling in my stomach that he's following me, and to test my hypothesis, I switch my direction. Instead of heading towards the Target, I walk towards the restaurant. The car immediately turns into the parking lot. I switch into freak out mode and speed walk to the front doors. In my time of panic, I didn't realize that the parking spot for the restaurant were completely empty. I pull on the doors and they're locked. They were apparently closed on Sundays. At this point, the man in the grey car was parked in the lot in front of the restaurant watching me. The way he was parked, I would have had to pass his car and go back on the path I was originally on. I stand there a moment, pretending not to notice, and thinking about what to do next. I obviously didn't want to walk any closer to the car than I already was, and decided to cut through the side shrubbery of the restaurant and head towards the closest shop I could find. The grey car comes out of the parking lot still following me, and I bolt into the dollar store across from the restaurant. I see the grey car park, and I walk up to one of the cashiers and explain what happened, and ask if I could use their phone to speak to my mother. She says of course and tells me to stay in here until my mum comes to get me. I call my mum and tell her about the car, and she of course freaks out. By this time I think the man in the car caught on because he eventually backs out and leaves. My mum shows up and thanks the cashier lady, and we drive to Target. Aside from both of us being shaken up, we were fine. It definitely ruined me walking alone again, but now that I'm an adult and live on my own, I carry pepper spray and a pocket knife everywhere I go just in case, and rarely walk anywhere unless I'm with someone or it's only a few minutes away. It still scares me today to think what could have happened, or what that man's intentions were. So to the man in the grey car, let's not meet again. Here in South Africa, we're in lockdown right now. I meant to travel for work to Santa Barbara, but since we're under lockdown, I can't go anywhere. I'm an entrepreneur with a tech startup, and since I travel mostly, I make use of the Regis co-working space for a hot desk or meeting room. It's quite flexible, and there's always coffee and pretty girls coming in and out. But since COVID broke out, I saw Regis as a public or corporate office, with many people coming in and out, therefore I was now stuck with no office. A buddy of mine told me he had an entire unused area at his house behind some offices. I would be alone, and I'd have my own kitchen, lounge, TV and bathroom. But the catch is that I'd have to park on the road. Let me explain the way the road is. It's a wide, steepish road with a massive park and zoo on the left, with 3 entrances and parking, and houses and businesses on the right. I use this road quite often to go to Florida Road, a popular bar and food district. There's only street lights on the houses and business side, as there was a red line or no parking line on the other side left and right, and I had to park outside the park. So I parked in the first parking nearest the building I was working at. It wasn't near, but I still had to walk a few meters. This story takes place one night before the lockdown. I had a call with a company in Denver, Colorado, which I had to start at 6 p.m. South African Standard Time. It went well, and I decided to pack up and leave. I wore formal shoes and carried my laptop in my bag. Being paranoid before I left, I looked on the CCTV before opening the gate and couldn't see anyone outside. I then proceeded to buzz myself out, locked up, and walked out. I don't know how, but in the time it took me to walk from the building to the gate, a man appeared. He seemed drunk or high, and was just hanging around against the fence on the side of the road my car was on, wearing a hooded sweatshirt with the hoodie down, torn brownish jeans and sneakers, and I started walking and looking down, keeping track of him from the corner of my eye. Mine was the only car left, so I would assume he knew that was mine. As I got closer to my car, I noticed him starting to walk out towards me, but I ignored him. He was still walking diagonally, trying to cut me off. He then said, as he was maybe 5 meters away, "Let me help you with your bag." Now, I had a comfortable laptop backpack on, and I was walking hands-free, and yet he asked me to help him with my bag. In South Africa, car guards usually help you with your grocery bags and expect a little tip, but not this guy. This guy knew what I was doing and where I was going, and what I was carrying. To make matters worse, he had his left hand in his hoodie pocket, and was walking fast. It all went down in a split second. He suddenly lunged at me, but being a football player, I feigned left and went right. In that split second I thought, if I ran to my car, which was still another 10 to 15 meters away, I would have surely not made it. I'm fast, but fumbling with keys, opening the door, getting in, I didn't seem confident. So I made the decision of jumping the fence into the now dark park. I made it over in one leap, albeit slightly slower, since my laptop backpack kept bouncing on my back. As soon as I hit the ground, I took my laptop bag off, held it in my hand and ran, and looked for a dark spot to hide, and ended up behind a massive tree in the park. There are a few of them, but it was the only one that didn't have a light directly hitting it. I heard him running and slurring words and saying something like, "Just give me the bag." So my car was on the other side of the tennis courts. If I could get to the tennis courts, sneak around and then run to my car, I would make it. But there was a lit open space between this tree and the tennis court, and he was running straight through the space, and I watched the angle of him running, and slowly rounded the tree to keep myself out of his line of sight. I honestly think him being high helped immensely here, as he ran straight past and towards the other side of the park. When he was a good distance away, which couldn't have been more than 20 meters, I made a break for it. Not being quiet now, I pushed away every branch and leaf which he heard and turned around and saw. I burst around the tennis courts, which was stupid because I could have just came back the way I came, and turned around and saw him yelling and running back at me. He stumbled every now and then, but was picking up the pace and actually gaining on me. I saw it. He had a knife, and it was out now. I puffed my way up the hill, opened the car, jumped in, locked the door with my laptop on my lap and started the car. When I looked back in the darkness, he was gone. He must have slunken back into the park when I was out of range. But where? I didn't wait to find out. I skidded and drove the hell out of there. I won't say that I won't work there again. I would. But maybe I'll Uber next time. In December of 2013, during my sophomore year of college, my at the time boyfriend, David, had a fraternity dinner banquet that I attended with him. It was a nice event requiring everyone to dress up. He was in a suit, I was in a dress and heels. We had a good time, then went back to his place to drop off the award David won and change into tacky Christmas sweaters for a party we had to attend later that night. It was maybe 7:30 p.m. But given that it was December, it was already dark out when we pulled into the parking lot outside of David's apartment. At his place, there was one road with parking on either side. Spots against the building and spots against a fence that lined the edge of the complex property. We parked in a fence spot, with the trunk of our car facing the building, directly across from the stairs leading up to David's floor, maybe 30 feet from safety. David and I got out and went to the truck to get his award when a man started to approach us. David noticed him and said, "What's up, man?" The man said nothing and kept walking towards us. As he got closer, I could see that he was wearing baggy black sweatpants and a camo hoodie. He had the hood on and the drawstrings were pulled tight, so I could only see about half of his face. Both of his hands were in the front hoodie pocket. David said again, "What's up?" And this time the man answered, "Get up against the car." Wait, what? And then the man pulled a gun from his hoodie pocket. "I said get up against the car." David got up against the back of the car while the man put the gun against his back. I was in utter shock at what was happening. So I took a step back, now trapped between two cars, a fence, and a man holding a gun to my boyfriend. He told David to give him all the money he had. We both really only used cards and never had cash on us. Unfortunately though, while home for Thanksgiving, his parents had given him $200 in 20s, all of which went into the hands of our mugger. Then he turned to me, pointed the gun at my face, and I'm less than a foot away here, and said, "Your turn." I was dressed up and only carrying a small clutch purse. I literally only had a phone and lip gloss on me. I stammered that I didn't have anything while staring at the gun he had pointed. He then went back to my boyfriend. At this point I could feel my blood starting to boil. I was becoming less frightened and more pissed off, outraged that this man was aggressively stealing from two broke college kids. How dare he treat other people like this? Couldn't he tell that we were coming from an event and he was going to ruin our night? I wanted to kick him with my big clunky heels so badly, but thankfully I realized that would probably just piss him off. I grabbed my phone, keeping my hands in my purse, and tried to dial 911. Unfortunately, my purse was too small to hide any movement, and I was just worried that if he saw me trying to call for help, he'd shoot. So I stood there, staring to the gun pressed into David's back. Finally, he took David's wallet and car keys and threw them in one direction, ran off in the other, and hopping the fence separating the apartment complex from a small neighborhood. David and I stood in silence for a second, trying to grasp what had just happened. We slowly gathered his keys and wallet and went inside and called the police, definitely in shock. This is where the story gets really interesting. The police had an officer patrolling on the other side of the apartment complex, as it was a group of 26 buildings and we were in 26. The cop was near one. because they had gotten the call the previous day about the same guy mugging someone over there. The police and detectives came over and took our story and asked us questions for about an hour. When they left, it was still relatively early, maybe 9 p.m. And we were very shaken. And David and I decided we'd still go to the tacky Christmas party we had planned on attending, thinking that it might take our minds off this horrible encounter. Our friend was hosting a pre-game at his apartment in Building 3 of the same complex. Even though we decided not to drink that night, we headed over after getting into our tacky sweaters. The pre-game got a little rowdy, and we heard a loud knock on the door. And we opened to see the person who lives next to our friend. He said, "Hey guys, you might want to keep it down. I don't want anyone getting into trouble. I have police and investigators in my apartment right now because I was mugged out here last night. I heard 2 more people got mugged tonight, so please be safe." David and I look at each other and then back at him. "Oh hi, that was us. We're the 2 that got mugged. Nice to meet you, fellow mugging victim." He laughed and shook our hands. The neighbor and David compared knives that they were now carrying as personal defense weapons before he went back to his place. Later on down the road, David and I had broken up, but the security at the complex was amped up. More lights were installed in the parking lot, and my girlfriend and I moved in. We had to park in the same set of spots where I was held at gunpoint. Probably a stupid way to face your fears, but we didn't have any other issues while we lived there. To the man who mugged both me and my friend's neighbor, let's not meet again. I'm a 20-year-old female. This story happened when I was about 15 and lived in the backside of a relatively nice suburban neighborhood. My street ended in a cul-de-sac, and my house was one of the 4 or 5 in the circle. When I was little, there was nothing behind the cul-de-sac other than a field with woods, but as I got older they continued to build onto the neighborhood, and when I was around 14 they started building in the field behind my home. At the time, it was just a small ladder-shaped road with maybe 1 or 2 houses being built towards the back. I had a friend I would walk or ride my bike to see that lived on the other side of the neighborhood. I would usually walk down my road and through the neighborhood to get to the other side to her house, but this newly built road cut straight across the back and cut the trip to her house almost in half. So on this specific day, I chose to walk with my little puppy to her house on this new back road. The road was in construction, so no one was ever really back there, secluded in the backside of the neighborhood, lined by thick Kentucky forest. I had one headphone in through my iPod Classic and was jamming out, kind of skip walk / dancing, all ignorant teenagers happy to see my friends, stupidly not paying attention to my surroundings. That's when I noticed that most of the construction crew and trucks were already gone and saw 2 men talking to each other by one of the houses. I couldn't tell if they were looking at me or not, and I got a strange vibe from the guys, so I kept an eye on them and clicked my iPod off, pulling my dog a bit closer, and just kept walking. They quickly rushed to a truck parked on the road parallel to me and turned it on. They sat there for a few seconds idle, and then pulled off relatively slow once I had passed them on my respective street. They went down and turned around on the connecting road and started to pull up slowly behind me. My "this is weird" alarm started going off, and I pick up my pace a bit. They did the same. We both slowly increased our pace until I leaned down, scooped up my dog and started running at full speed, my heart pounding in my ears. Their truck's front bumper was basically at my heels, running faster than I ever thought I could. The truck still increasing in speed. I cut a hard right off the road and down the steep hill into a small strip of forest between this new road and the backside of a few other houses down the hill a bit. As I slid on dirt and rocks at full speed, clutching my dog to my side, I heard the truck slam on the brakes right above me. I slid into this thin bush and laid flat. My dog made a whimpering sound trying to squirm out of my arms, and I covered his mouth and nose with my hand and held my breath. The 2 men had gotten out of the truck maybe 10 feet away from me at the top of this little steep drop-off. I remember staring at the sky through the bush, flat on my back, dead still as they started to come towards me, searching for me. "Where'd she go?" the one man said to the other. "Shh, shut up." The other muttered back, "Hey." He called, drawn out almost like how someone would say, come out," while playing hide and seek. I was frozen in this bush in total fear, as the men leaned over the bush and somehow didn't look straight down. "Honey," he called again, and I stared straight up at his nostrils, the evening sun casting a dark shadow over his eyes, the bill of his baseball hat. "Hell, I don't know," he says, frustrated and quiet, and started to turn around. "Let's get out of here," the other said, already running back up the hill to the truck. I laid there until the truck pulled away with the puppy clutched to my chest, and I ran back down the hill and all the way home. I ran in the door and slammed it behind me, basically throwing my dog down and turning around to peep out the glass to make sure I wasn't followed. I told my parents, but they said to not take the road to my friend's house anymore. I wish they'd done more. But it was in the past now, right? I hope those guys never hurt anyone or tried to chase anyone else with their truck. So weird guys in the truck from my old neighborhood. Let's not meet again. This happened when I was about 5 or 6, with my older brother who was around 10. Our family went camping a lot, with another family who had a son around my brother's age. My dad was in the Navy, so my brother and I were used to walking around base to our friends' houses, or to a nearby park, as it was pretty safe. So we had no problems going place to place without our parents. I guess that's why our mum let us ride our bikes down to the park at the campground we were staying at. We had been begging to go, and the park wasn't too far from the spot we were staying at. Of course, at the time I was obsessed with animals, and my only goal in life was to one day work with Steve Irwin, so I brought my dog along. He was fully grown but not very intimidating and definitely not aggressive. He was a border collie, blue heeler, black lab, Australian shepherd mix that I loved more than anything. My brother and I play until our hearts are content, or as much as we can while still holding onto the dog's leash. We stop so my brother can use the bathroom, and I wait by the wall outside with my dog. I'm standing there just petting him, and this huge guy walks out. I still remember that he was wearing a black jacket and a grey shirt and jeans, and he had a big beer belly and grey hair. My dog, who had never even looked at someone funny before, picked up his ears and stared at the guy, hair standing up in attack position. The guy stopped right in front of me and I felt my whole body go numb and my blood turn cold. I went rigid and pushed back into the wall as far as I could. The man stared into my eyes and stepped closer. My dog was practically rabid at this point, tail up, foaming at the mouth, hair standing up like a cartoon cat, and growling and snarling like nothing I'd ever heard before. The man looked at me for a while, then to my dog. I still remember his eyes, brown, but something glossed over. They almost sparkled. My dog stepped towards him and he backed away, eventually turning and carrying on. My brother came out after the guy was gone, and I told him there was a stranger or something, and he told me the guy had been staring at him too when he was drying his hands. We decided to go back to the camper after that, and we never told our parents because we probably thought we'd get in trouble. Stupid, I know, but I was 5. I never stopped wondering what would have happened if my dog hadn't have been there. He unfortunately passed a little over a year ago, and that was the only time he'd ever shown aggression like that in his life. They say animals know, and I believe that completely. I also think now that that guy may have been waiting in the bathroom for kids to show up, and didn't do anything to my brother because he didn't know if there were any adults outside. Then when he saw I was the only person there, he tried to make a move. I'm not sure what his intentions were, but I'm glad that we didn't meet again. I grew up in a small town with no more than a few stoplights and a few thousand residents in the Great Basin Desert of the western US. For those of you who have never been, you cannot begin to understand just how vast and isolated you can become in my home state. It's a breeding ground for strange people to hide out from the law, keep to themselves, and do whatever it is they do, and remain a secret. As someone who frequently spends days exploring isolated, vast stretches of desert, hours away from cell service in some cases, I unfortunately have a few stories where I was held at gunpoint, or thought I was going to be taken. But those stories are for another day. This is my earliest encounter with someone I wish to never meet. The valley where this story takes place is one where they found a family murdered. Just a few months prior to this encounter, in fact. It will give you a feel for what happens in the desert. I was roughly 12 at the time and I'm 22 now. I was with my mom and 3 younger brothers. My dad and uncle were prospecting for gold and we got bored. So we thought we'd go hike down into the valley to an abandoned miner's shack about 2 miles away. No biggie. We've done this many times in the past and it's cool to see the old ruins. But note, my dad and uncle had the pistols. We did not. We get down there with no issue, and the shack looks clearly abandoned and in disrepair. It appears to be from the 1930s and is resting on a small hill with a dirt road leading to it. We go inside and explore, and all is good, till I see on one of the old shelves brand new canned goods, fresh paper wrappers and all. I thought to myself that it was odd, perhaps some backpackers left them for the next guy. But boy, was I wrong. We kept exploring this house until I come into a room and see something that I will never forget. The feeling you get when you instantly know something is horribly wrong. And that stuck with me hard. That room had a fresh house cat hung from the rafters of the ceiling with its abdomen split open and the intestines hanging out. It had to have been only a few days old. I never let my mum or brother see it. I just ran to the room that they were in and said that we had to leave. I said I had a bad feeling from those cans. We get out the house and we're about 50 feet away when my brother insists he needs to go to the bathroom. I didn't tell him what I saw because I knew it would freak him out, and he had to go. So here we are, a baseball throw away from this house, and my brother is going to the bathroom. Just as he finishes from the backside of the hill that the shack is on, comes an old white beat-up van, and I remember thinking that this is it. I will never see my dad again. They'll never know what happened to us. Out of the van, I vividly remember seeing 4 men step out and look in our general direction. I picked up my youngest brother and my mum the other 2, and we took off running. I've never felt more scared in my life. I didn't dare look back to see if they were trailing after us. I couldn't make myself. After what feels like forever, we finally get out the valley and meet up with my dad and uncle. We tell them our story, and we get the hell out of there. To this day, I still can't help but wonder if I'd be alive today had I not seen the dead cat before those guys got to the shack. So to the men, mutilating cats in the desert, let's never meet again. I was 12, and I had come down with a suspected case of glandular fever, so Mum booked me in with our family GP. Mum loved him since he had delivered my sister 8 years earlier, and we had been seeing him ever since. Mum and I are in the waiting room. She's flipping through the terrible magazines, and I'm just watching the fish in the tank. The receptionist pops her head out and calls my name, so Mum turns to me and says, "You're old enough to go in by yourself." A bad feeling hit the pit of my stomach. I shake my head and insist she comes with me. There was never a nurse or anyone else present during appointments, and there was no way I was going in alone. Now, nothing weird had ever happened with our doctor before. He was always professional and kind, but this time I felt uneasy. He was checking my lymph nodes for inflammation. The neck ones were swollen. Then he checked my armpits. Swollen. I'm getting a weird vibe, a bad vibe, like he was enjoying it. Mum didn't notice. Finally, he checks my groin. Swollen. I was very uncomfortable with him at this point. It just felt weird. Bad gut feeling. Diagnosis: glandular fever. We left and I didn't say anything about the experience. But a few months later, our doctor abruptly left the practice. The new doctor was a lovely lady, and I breathed a sigh of relief to see him gone. 4 years later, Mum comes into my room. Remember Dr. Gardner? Well, he's in jail for molesting his friend's kids while they were all away on holiday. She tells me with surprise. No. I relate my experience to her and she was shocked. She had no idea. That was weird in itself, as Mum has had weird premonitions over the years. So glad I insisted that Mum accompany me with a pedo doctor. Could have been a lot worse than just the bad gut feeling. I'm a 15-year-old male, and I live in an apartment with my parents, younger brother, elder cousin, and grandfather. However, all of these people had gone over to a party, which, because of tuition, I couldn't attend. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that I'm a huge WWE fan. Anyway, I was coming up the elevator, which was on the far end of the hall, and as soon as the door opened, I saw a man at the other end, probably around 5'10", just as tall as me. He was wearing a mask, but the creepy part was that it was a mask with devilish goat horns. Now, my house is right in the middle of the lobby, and I'm pretty spooked by his mask, but hey, everyone has to wear one, and maybe he's being creative. But that all changed when he tilted his head and from a back pocket produced a vicious-looking knife. You should know that we are both at the end of our respective lobbies. He hadn't moved, and my ass was about to move hard. I ran and tried to get to my door before him, but he was surprisingly fast and able to cover a similar distance to me. When I realized that I wouldn't be able to reach it first, and that I would still need time to unlock my door, that's where my WWE comes to save me. As I see he closing in on me, I hit him with a move called the spear, which is basically running into your opponent's belly with your shoulder. He was coming pretty fast, so I took advantage of the speed and crashed him with the spear. I then quickly opened the door and locked it. I called my dad before the police because, well, I don't know why, but of course by the time that they reached them, he was gone. It still terrifies me to think what would have happened if I hadn't have trusted a wrestling move with my life. Something you need to understand is that, in a lot of ways, my parents are wonderful and I love them. But I had a lot of repressed mental issues as a kid. Well, more than I do now. I was miserable, felt trapped and scared because I knew I could never live up to certain expectations, plus I was a sensitive kid, which unfortunately clashed with my parents' approach of handling things. Not to mention I was basically an outcast in school for years. I decided to run away. I thought that since I hated my life so much, I was already suicidal, and I thought I might as well run away to give it one last shot. I had this whole idea planned out in my head. Stupid move, and naive, I know. And now that we have gotten that out the way, here's the story. I decided the best way to do it was to be with another person, and coincidentally found a local forum where kids and teenagers were asking for runaway buddies. There were no recent enough posts, so I made one of my own using a fake name and throwaway email address. And after a while I was at my lowest point, I got a reply. He introduced himself as a 20-something-year-old man, if I remember right. I was about 14, and he said he was fed up with society and was putting together a group of runaways to live in the forest together, surviving off nature's gifts. I could see this was all shady, but at the same time I was desperate and not thinking clearly at all, so I reply asking for more details. He asks my phone number and if we can talk. I didn't feel comfortable talking on the phone. I asked if I could get more details first. Which forest were you thinking of? What would we do in winter? How many others have signed up for this? Then he sent a very scary response. Are you stupid? I said, give me your Facebook, with a few choice words added in. His facade had dropped. I didn't respond after that, and neither did he as far as I was aware, as I stopped checking the email after a while. I don't know who he was or what he was really planning for me. Probably the most messed up thing though is that for a moment I actually considered meeting with him. I thought he could do what I couldn't. But I'm much better now. I don't want to even think what could have happened or about the time of my life in general. So, creepy guy on the internet. Let's not meet. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so very, very much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. If of course you did, you can let me know. If anything creepy or horrifying has ever happened to you, you can tell me about it by sending it to my email or posting it on my Reddit page. Either are fine. Now, I'd like to extend a huge thank you as always to my wonderful members and patrons. You may notice that the names have been updated. I apologize for taking so long in doing so. It's just quite a long process to do in the first place. So I try and stick to doing it every week or so. But yeah, thank you everyone, because we've got a whole influx of new members and a handful of patrons. So thank you everyone who signed up. It really does mean a lot and helps tremendously with the channel running and upkeep and stuff. If you'd like to join and chip in like $1 or $3 every month, like a coffee, that'd be pretty cool. Would help me out significantly. And you can find the links in the description, of course. But for now, I think we're going to wrap things up. So stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.